Right. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to look at Chapter 5, and this is the intro to it. Chapter 5 is the chapter studying histology. So, histology is simply the study of tissues. A histologist is someone who studies tissues, and it is a complicated study, actually, and we're just going to hit kind of the highlights with it. To understand what I'm talking about, to be a histologist, you have to be a medical doctor first, and then go back for several years of training. So, I don't expect you to be a histologist at the end of this, but I do expect you to know a little bit about just the basics of histology. So, in this, we look at how, excuse me, our body, if we start breaking it down and looking at different types of tissues, all of the tissues that make up our body can be classified into four major classifications: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, which are the two we concentrate on in lab 2, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue, which again we concentrate on the first two because muscle and nervous system tissue, we've got our own chapters in lecture and several labs that look at them. But just some ideas about them. All right. So epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue is always going to have a free surface. That is kind of a big part of that first word, the first part of the word, epi meaning above or outer. Connective tissue, which is the most abundant type of tissue in the body, is going to basically, for all practical purposes, not to be kind of funny, but it connects. It is kind of the go-between, and there's a lot of different types of connective tissue. Then we have muscle. There are three types of muscle tissue: skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. But the one thing they all have in common is they are designed to contract with force. They change shape, they shorten. And it's kind of important to remember that muscles can only push, they can never pull. And that kind of comes in handy if you're starting to think about certain muscles and what they do. If you remember they can only pull, they can't push, it will help, especially in the respiratory system when you look at the intercostal muscles. And then nervous tissue, again, all cells are just mind-blowingly complex and just amazing, but the nervous tissue, the neuron, is just in a category all by itself. So the neuron is designed to, and the nervous system, nervous tissue, is designed to transmit impulses. It is the cable, the telephone cable for everything, the communication. So let's look at a few things about them. This is a little breakdown of them, again, given some just general ideas, general locations for them and whatever. And in future videos for this chapter, we'll go into each of these a little bit in depth. But one of the things to look at, that we'll look at just this in the general information, is three different ways that cells are bound together. And one way is called a tight junction. A tight junction is kind of like stitching. It is meant to be kind of waterproof. It's not real strong. I mean, it's strong, but it's not real strong like the next one we'll look at. But again, it is more like a stitching that will hold the two cell membranes together. If we want strength, we get into this, which is called a desmosome. A desmosome is kind of like a welded area between two cells that hold them together. And then we have what's called a gap junction. A gap junction is simply like having little PVC pipes that allow things to move between the cells. So if I'm a cell over here and I need some Grey Poupon, I can ask over here, and if they have it, they can bring it across these little gap junctions. We're going to see that for instance, cardiac muscle cells have a lot of desmosomes and gap junctions where they meet. It allows it to be strong, but also allows for the communication, the cytoplasm to move between the two, or sarcoplasm, we'll say, between the two cells, and that allows for the heart to act as one muscle altogether, even though it is many muscles working together. So that is kind of the basics of it. This again is going to give a little idea of the general characteristics of these. Like I said, the desmosomes, one of the things to kind of key in on is when it talks about desmosomes, think of welding in general. Any question that comes up will have about desmosomes, will have that in it. So anyway, that's the introduction, and we will move on to the next type of tissue and go from there. All right, take care.